If you like this podcast and would like to support us, please rate, comment, and subscribe.
And also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And now it's time to get a unique slant on current events from your favorite half-Asian couple. Get ready to know what's happening in the world today with your hosts, Shaine and Nico.
Hello, everybody. What's happening?
Did you like that purr? I felt like Misha needed to make an appearance.
Oh, it was all right.
What? Her purr is the most calming thing in this house.
I'm Shaine.
And I'm Nico.
And what's going on, everyone? Hope you're having a good day or whatever.
And Misha is sitting on my lap, so it is a good day.
Yeah. So what are we going to talk about today on this podcast?
Well, unfortunately, we want to kind of talk about the culture war in this episode because if you've watched the news or been online or anything recently, you'd know that there was an attack that happened last week, a couple days ago. It was in New Zealand, and it was at a mosque.
Yeah.
49 people were shot.
Mm-hmm.
And the shooter actually wrote a manifesto, which is, like, completely insane. And we don't really want to spread around the manifesto to, like, spread his message or something. But we do
to give
kind
him
of
more attention. I mean, I know we're kind of devoting a lot of the today's episode on this whole thing, but
it is something that I think is worth talking about because the culture war affects all of us, and I think that people take it to the extremes. They're like playing into what he wants, basically, and he really wanted to accelerate the culture war. So
yeah, it definitely looked like it for sure.
Yeah. So I know that I think it was before he started his attack, he shouted subscribe to PewDiePie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which it seemed like he was only doing that because he knew saying that, because PewDiePie, I don't know, he's kind of become this divisive figure for some reason because, some of the media painted him as a racist, a Nazi or whatever.
Yeah, and the reason why they did that is because he's a representation of alternative media, not just like for news or anything like that, but just like, he's the number one subscribed person on YouTube, and the media thinks of him as a threat because they can't control what he says. It's not like news networks where everything is very planned out and like he's just like behind a camera. He just turns on his camera, records whatever he wants, and then puts it out for everyone to see. And they can't control that, so they want to take him down.
Yeah, he's got the Pew News and the Lawai, which is funny because his videos, like just one of his videos gets, at least double the amount of views on mainstream media.
Yeah, and I think that scares them because, and I mean, like, if you think about it, if they could take him down, then it would kind of send a message to everyone else who's trying to make it in the alternative media world. Even if you're not doing news, even if you just have an audience, you're like a threat to them. So they want to take him down.
Yeah, anyone who's doing their own kind of news analysis, like Tim Pool or the Joe Rogan Experience too, or just anything like that, then like you were saying, they see them as a threat, which is weird because I bet I'm pretty sure when PewDiePie was doing his videos all those years ago, I'm sure there was no thought where he was thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna be painted like this, and I'm just a guy who plays video games, so
Yeah. And going back to what happened, the New Zealand shooter knew that he was a big part of the culture war, even if like PewDiePie didn't want to be. He's a representation of alternative media on the internet,
Well,
you know. So
I'm sure
he wanted to mention him to fuel the fire for the mainstream media to attack him.
Yeah, and what I was going to say was, I'm sure, I know he didn't want to really be that representation, and I'm sure there are people who do, but I'm pretty sure he didn't want to be that representation.
He seems like a very laid back type of guy. Like he doesn't want to. He's just doing his thing, you know, on the internet. He's not trying to influence people on purpose or anything like that. Right. So, but the media, since he's a threat to them, they want every chance they can to attack him, and the New Zealand shooter knew that. So he also knew that by using memes and what do you call it, I guess just like references in his manifesto in order to make it look like a slippery slope situation, you know, like the left always talks about, or like high profile left-wing people who are like control freaks. I'm not talking about just people who believe in left-wing concepts. I mean like the people who are really authoritarian.
Yeah.
They are kind of like against memes and all that stuff, saying that it's like a slippery slope into like neo-Nazism and stuff. And then you think about it and you're like, that's ridiculous. Like no one actually like would do that. So then it's kind of playing into their fear by him putting all those like references into their sort of like, I mean, basically the whole thing is a bait.
Yeah.
So, but he knew that the left wouldn't just, you know, think about that. They would just take that as, okay, see, look, it just, if you like make those edgy memes, or if you play video games, or if you're subscribed to PewDiePie, then look what it leads to. Someone on Reddit kind of summed it up really well. I was hoping that you could read it though, because I'm bad at reading things out loud.
Okay. So yeah, like she said, this was on Reddit. And before we get started, you can buy us a coffee at ko-fi.com/hapusupremacy, or on Patreon at patreon.com/hapusupremacy. Or you can donate to our PayPal at paypal.me/hapusupremacy. Or you can buy a t-shirt and other merchandise at teespring.com/stores/hapusupremacy.
You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Petite Nikoko. And you can follow Shane at Shane Scalf. Also, you can support us by subscribing to our channel on YouTube at youtube.com/c/hapusupremacy. All of the links for all the things we discussed will be in the description.
And it goes, actually, it matters a lot. The guy's manifesto makes it clear why he said, subscribe to PewDiePie. It's because he wants to create division and conflict. He wants the media to go after PewDiePie and his fans, and he wants to accelerate the culture war. Everything about the attack was cultivated for that end, from the choice of victims to the weapons to the people he references. He knows Felix won't approve of his actions, and he knows Felix wants nothing to do with him. He is associating himself with PewDiePie because he wants to see Felix condemned with that association. He wants the mainstream media to run with the narrative that PewDiePie and his supporters are alt-right or fascist adjacent. If the media falls for the bait, then we'll see the murderer's ultimate plan fulfilled. YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook will likely be his unwitting pawns as they crack down on problematic people like PewDiePie. If this isn't addressed, then the murders will have not only been a horrific crime, but they will have also been mission success from the perspective of the killers. They cannot be allowed to succeed, so it is actually important here that the regular combatants in the culture war lay down their weapons and refuse to fight over this. If they don't, then the killers will get exactly what they want.
I think that sums it up really well, because what he wants is the people who are kind of centrist or in the middle or don't care about the culture war to care and be radicalized on either side. Like, you know, he wants people to accuse people of influencing this type of attack, or like influencing people to go far right or whatever, and then the other people will have to defend themselves, so then they'll fight back against them, and then it will just make things worse. But by doing that, ironically, it's just fulfilling what he wants.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the manifesto, he was saying, "Are you doing this for fame?" He was like, "No, I'm going to be forgotten pretty quickly, but my actions will be remembered."
Yeah, everything about it is just so sickening because it's like he's really well versed in everything that's going on the internet and stuff. And I mean, the internet kind of really is a battleground right now.
Yeah.
And he's really well versed in everything that's going on from the things that normal people are talking about all the way through like the radicalization, like people who are actually what they call neo-Nazis now, or like white supremacists. And I think that part of the reason why people go that way is because they don't have a strong sense of family, because they get radicalized and they don't have anyone to talk to, and then they don't bounce their ideas off of other people or anything. So then they end up, thinking that what they believe is 100% correct and that violence is justified.
Yeah, he also said in the manifesto that he was an introvert and that he was a pretty private person and that he's been planning this whole thing, or he was planning this whole thing for, what is it, like 2-3 years or so? So he's been planning it for a while. It kind of makes you think too, like who else is doing this? Planning this all out with these elaborate
and I mean, like,
things or whatever.
I can't remember. I think it was Tim Pool who said it, but someone said that like the left has a lot more like, they react violently in smaller ways, like not killing people or whatever, but like they'll you ask them a question at a rally and then they'll try to like pepper spray you or something, so that happens really often. So you see that happening a lot, and then conservatives kind of, or not conservatives, but like the extreme right-wing people will hold it in and then become more violent because they would be the ones with.
I think the left do it, like you were saying, more in small doses, but they do it a lot.
Yeah.
But the more on the right, they do it not as much. They do it,
very
little.
Very little.
Yeah, but
then
whenever
when they do it,
it's everyone. All this attention comes at them. And,
that too.
Yeah.
They're covered in the media like 24/7 for like weeks. So then people think that there's like a huge problem.
Yeah, and also kind of fulfills that, see, there's a mainstream bias. They're talking about those right-wing or, right-wing people doing all this bad stuff. But whenever a left, like Antifa do anything, they'll mention it for like 3 seconds and then they'll completely forget like it ever happened.
Or they'll even defend it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously the media is the one who's fueling all the fire. And he knows that. Like the shooter, the murderer, he knew that. So he was giving them some bait so that they could run with all these stories,
Yeah, well, speaking of the whole, like, bait thing in his manifesto, like, he mentions one of the questions he was asking himself was, where are you a supporter of Donald Trump? And his answer is, as a symbol of renewed white identity and common purpose, sure. As a policymaker and leader, dear God, no.
Yep, and then the media ran with that, and they were like, see, he said that he's a symbol of white supremacy.
But they completely forget about the part where he, as a policymaker and leader, he thinks he's a piece of crap, like he's terrible.
Yeah, they'll leave that part out because they know that most people won't go for themselves to go through the trouble of trying to find that and read it. So
it sucks because, anytime Trump's name is mentioned, we don't have to, but the mainstream media feels like they have to always talk about it. I guess because he's the president.
Yeah, within less than 24 hours, they were blaming people who had no part in any of this. And I think it's unfair to blame someone just because their name comes up.
Yeah. Because,
I don't know. Like, okay, for example, within 24 hours, they were blaming Donald Trump.
Right.
They were blaming Candace Owens because he said, and that you can tell that he's doing it on purpose. He said that she was a main influencer of him, which makes no sense. If you know anything about her, I don't really like her that much, but if you know anything about her, she's not extreme right or anything like that. She just seems like the normal, MAGA shill, in my opinion. Sorry, but that's what she seems like to me. And then,
and who knows? Maybe she did have a change of heart. I don't know.
Yeah, and then there was other people blaming. This is just crazy. The left was blaming Chelsea Clinton.
Yeah,
I have an
that was pretty
article that I
crazy.
wanted to pull up about that. I don't really understand why though. They were saying that she's responsible. Let me see if I can find that one. A bunch of people confronted her on video apparently. And then someone wrote an article about her being confronted on video.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's see. She was at the vigil for the people who passed away, who were murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were saying that because Chelsea Clinton condemned, what's her name? Omar?
Yeah, Ilhan Omar or something like that.
Ilhan
yeah.
Omar, yeah. Someone who's a representative in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
She had previously condemned her as an anti-Semite, I guess. So they were saying that because she condemned the only black Muslim in Congress, that by doing that it's fueling anti-Muslim.
Like she's an Islamophobe or something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
So then they blamed her partly for the attack, which makes no sense.
Yeah, I know.
The shooter had been planning this for 2 years, first of all. Also, his radicalization came from dark corners of the web, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm.
And also by mostly by that's like fueled by the media
Yeah.
and lack of in real life rational people talking to him.
Well, yeah, he was a loner. You know, he was getting his news from wherever he was getting it, and I don't know. He just got insane, I guess. I don't know.
Well, he also mentioned that part of the reason why he had been so radicalized to create such a plan was that when he was traveling through Europe, he had been reading all those news articles about Islamic terror attacks, and then he thought maybe it was an exaggeration, but then when he went there, he saw things like that actually happen. So then he says that it's an attack on his people, even though he's like, okay, first of all, he's Australian. Even though he was in New Zealand, he was an immigrant there. And when he was traveling through Europe, he identifies himself with those people just because they're all white, even though probably culturally everyone's totally different. So that to me sounds weird, but
So do you think he was just looking at it from just a skin color standpoint?
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
but he had mentioned the little girl who died in one of the van attacks in Sweden. So he had mentioned one of the things that really radicalized him was the Islamic terror attack, where a little girl named Ebba Ackerland was killed by, I think it was a van. So then after that, he was kind of like, why is no one doing anything? And then he's like, maybe I should just do something.
Yeah.
But-
We went to the extreme in terms of doing something. I mean, he went to.
Well, he thinks that violence is justified because people or those Islamic extremists are being violent
Yeah.
towards white people who he identifies with, like himself, But I think one thing I wanted to bring up that no one really talks about, like in all this, you can debate all day whether they, like, those Islamic extremists just attack people because of, in the name of Islam or whatever. But it's kind of dumb to ignore the fact that the reason why they're in those countries is because they're finding that an opportunity to move to those countries because of the refugee crisis right now.
Yeah.
And when you look at why there's a refugee crisis, it has to do with U.S. imperialism.
The terror wars, yeah.
Yeah. We're fighting terror wars, and then we're funding both sides. And I know someone's going to say, oh my God, you read a history book or whatever, but I have looked into this stuff, okay?
He didn't look hard enough, though.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I need to find something where it says that we're fighting for freedom and,
right.
we're just trying to spread democracy.
Democracy?
But yeah, so we're committing acts of violence through the military on civilians,
Yeah.
drone strikes, all that other stuff. Then we build up schools and then we drone them down, stuff like that. Or
And this is not just a, one party problem. It's a Democrat and Republican problem.
yeah, it's one thing that they're bipartisan on for some reason. When it comes to war, everyone always votes to agree.
Yeah.
So that whole thing there with, the military industrial complex and all the stuff that goes along with it, and all this regime change and all these things that we're trying to do in other countries where they don't really need us to do anything. I mean, they're going to have problems regardless, but why do we need to be involved, right? It's creating a huge refugee crisis. And by funding all these rebel groups and also fighting against them,
Yep.
a lot of people are being, forced out of the place that they want to live. And then a lot of these extremists who move along with the refugees find this a good opportunity to migrate with them. And then how can you tell the difference when people are, the people in Europe who support this immigration and this mass migration, they just feel bad. They feel guilty about this for some reason. And so then they don't background check people well enough. And then all these extremists get in.
Well, that's why, too, that a lot of people would say, taxation is theft because they're, taking our money and they're funding all, like you were saying, all these groups or whatever, rebel groups. And I mean, isn't it weird that we're, some of the money that we're giving them is also funding the enemy, quote unquote? Like, it's kind of weird how it's almost like a 360. It's all like, it's a big circle.
Yeah, and it's all, there's so many reasons why we're over there, but none of them are really for the good of the people on either side.
Yeah.
Like, I know oil has to do with it. Money has to do with it because, war is money.
Well, it's like they say, I can't remember exactly who said it, but, war is the like the health, the state. If there's war, then the state is healthy.
Yeah. And, by having all of these things going on, like terror attacks that end up coming to the United States too, then our security just gets tighter and tighter and the police state gets bigger and bigger.
And that's why some people want, funding to go down because then we can put that money somewhere else. And that's where the whole, the divide would be between, like the libertarians who believe in the anti-war stuff and also the left wing, like socialists and communists, where they both both agree on that. But then in terms of where the money goes or where, how we get that money, that's where the differences will come in,
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, we can talk about the anti-war stuff first because that's the most important issue. But then once we get to that point, then we can start talking about where, all the other things we have differences and of opinion on or whatever.
I think that's why it's important to support anti-war, because even if the other ideas of that person don't line up, because you can't get to any of the other ideas if we're still funding that,
It's one of those things too where it's a hard truth because there's some people who don't want to listen to what we're saying right now. People will probably turn it off.
Some people will comment on YouTube and call us retarded.
They'll hear the first, 15 minutes and say, okay, yeah, that's interesting or whatever. But then once we start talking about all this other stuff, that's when they'll stop listening because they don't want to hear it, Because I was at that point where I didn't want to hear it, But I don't know. It's just interesting because it's one of those things where you have to question your own state, I think, and it's healthy to question it. I believe, and so I think, living in the United States that we do, it's always a good thing to always question what's going on with the government because the government is supposed, the U.S. government is quote unquote supposed to be working for the people, and to protect us, or quote unquote. But it's one of those things where you have to always look at everything with one of those like one eye open, one eye closed type of thing. I don't know, because I know there's some people who are going to say, well, just collapse it all and start over. But then there's some people who say, okay, well, we have it right now. We want to just make it less. I don't know. I don't know how to put it into words right, but I don't know if what I'm trying to say is conveying right, but we want to like make it smaller because we're supposed to be the small government, right? We're supposed to have a small government or as little as possible. But then when you think about it, our government's actually the biggest government in world history. You know,
Well, I think
it's gone from the smallest to the biggest.
I think some people think that there's no way to control the state now, though.
Well, we can just vote it out, you know, vote whatever, you know, or what, you know, and all that stuff.
You know what's funny about that? Even the murderer who wrote the manifesto said voting is violence, and
Yeah.
he put a lot of, like, to go back to that whole thing. He put a lot of like catchphrases from different groups.
A lot of talking points. Yeah.
Yeah, like taxation is theft. But then he added his own little thing. Taxation is theft. Only if there's non-white people in the society, because then they're
If it's
stealing
funding
from
the
the white people.
Thumbs up from me.
Yeah, and then there was the whole I'm an eco-fascist thing.
Which is, that was the
I mean,
random
that
thing.
makes sense to what his ideology is, because if you look at like Richard Spencer, I know he's supposedly nonviolent or whatever, but if you look at what he believes in, it's very much the same thing, you know. I'm an environmentalist. You can't have a traditional society without being environmentally conscious. And like they always talk about how like if you remove certain things from society, like banning drugs, you know, and we have to make it law that we have to be super eco-friendly, then, but like a white ethno state, then that kind of goes in line with what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And that's where his ideas lie. And I think that's why people are getting confused, like when they're like, what is he? Is he like left wing or is he like extreme right wing? But I don't think you can really categorize that. That's just, I mean, basically what he said, an eco-fascist. He's one of those people too who believed in like population control. And I think that's why in his manifesto he references fertility rates a lot. And he's like, well, at this point we can't catch up. And that's why I'm not going to start a family and like have my own kids.
Well, that was the first thing you mentioned. It's the birth rate.
Yeah. And he said that's why he wants to murder people, because their fertility is too high. And they're non-white, you know. And they're moving into his land, quote unquote.
He's like Thanos.
Yeah. He was like, the earth can't sustain this population. And that sounds like something AOC would say.
Well, I mean, the Green New Deal basically says,
Yeah.
If we don't do something in the next 10 to 12 years, we're doomed.
Yeah, so he probably is like, yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah, so we're going to regulate the cow farts and
ban meat.
Yeah, ban meat and also rebuild every building in the country somehow.
Yeah, but anyway, not to go off on that tangent, because we already did that. But yeah, so when I read it, it made like all the stuff that he said made sense to how he thinks, in my opinion. But I think a lot of people who don't know anything about all this, like all the backstory of the culture war, wouldn't understand it.
Yeah.
So they'd be like, "What the fuck? Like, what the fuck is he?
Yeah.
He's just saying a bunch of stuff." But no, he's actually pretty clear about what happened there, and everyone's just taking the bait.
It just sucks because he had to go to this extreme in terms of killing people, because, you know, like we were saying, some of the stuff in that was like, okay, I get it, you know, or I understand where you're coming from or something like that. But then it's like, well, why'd you have to go and kill people? That's not going to solve anything.
Well, if you look up basically what he believed was, and they always think about this, they're like, my beliefs are so right that it justifies violence.
I think anyone who thinks that is just straight up stupid. You know, it's kind of like with the war thing, you know. Oh, well, it's justified. We're helping them. It's okay. We can kill millions of people if it helps such and such amount of people, whatever.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And I think when people say that there's like a pipeline from libertarianism to fascism, it makes no sense, because it's completely opposite.
Yeah, I know. You go from not violating to NAP to completely violating the NAP 100% or whatever, you know?
Yeah, people who say that don't understand libertarianism, they just think of it as, I don't know what they think.
I think some people think of it as just straight up anarchy, when libertarianism isn't that at all.
Well, even anarchy, like the anarchy, you know, ANCAP, they would be completely only about the NAP.
Yeah.
So that doesn't make any sense either.
That's true.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, like, the only thing I can think of is they think, oh, yeah, freedom. Sounds great. And then they go down this internet hole into fascism, and then for some reason they're like, actually, only for white people.
Yeah. No.
Everyone else can go die.
Yeah. Like, what kind of pipeline is that? You know, it's like,
I have no idea.
It's almost like you're going through like a really big pipeline, and then you have to like, and then you're down a path of that pipeline. Then all of a sudden you're in this, like, you find yourself in a really small pipeline. You have to squeeze it out, you know?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
I have
Like,
no
the
idea if
whole
that makes
thing,
sense.
the whole thing sounds like he's just very against liberty, because he wants to stir up the culture so that freedoms can be restricted. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. He said he specifically chose guns or firearms because he wants to stir up the conversation.
Yeah, he knows it's going to create a divide because there's people who want to straight up, you know, violate the Second Amendment. And then there's others who are like, no, I'm going to go buy guns because I feel, you know, they're going to come take them or whatever. He knows that.
Yeah.
And that, you know.
He wants to radicalize the people who are trying to be reasonable and still compromise. And I that's one thing that I think some people say, oh, it's dumb to be a centrist. That means you're weak-willed or whatever. But I don't think so. I think being willing to compromise is a good thing.
But what kind of compromises, though? Because they're going to say, well, what kind of, you know, well, if you compromise this, then you're a terrible person. But if you compromise this, you're bad. You know, if you compromise for, I don't know, whatever it is that they don't like, you know what I mean? Like if someone doesn't like this, but you compromise and say, okay, if you do this and, you know, and I get this, you know, because that's kind of what Congress does anyway. There's a lot of compromising going on there.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe not just compromising on anything, but like more of rationalizing your position and also taking into account other people's point of view.
Because I think if you're living in just like a pure, you know, either you're this 100% or that's it, you know, like I'm only going to align myself with such and such people who are 100% aligned with what I believe in, then you're going to be in a small group of people. Because even people who consider themselves libertarians or conservatives or liberals, whatever, everyone's going to think of something different. Everyone's going to have some difference of opinion anywhere. Even if you align yourself with a such and such philosophy or political, you know, ideology or whatever, everyone's going to think something different.
Yeah, and I think the people who are sort of caught in the middle, I'm not saying completely center or whatever, but center right, center left, a lot of the people who just don't even care, a lot of people just want to have their life and not have people trying to control them. That's what I think.
Yeah.
And this guy wants everyone to have such a strong opinion that they go to either side.
Yeah.
And the media is really not helping it because
the media took the bait like that
from the first day.
I mean, it's not even again, if you thought the media had no bias or whatever, I mean, it's like it's out there, it's right there in front of you, and yet some people are either they're too stupid or they're just blind or they don't want to acknowledge it. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I watch CNN all the time. I don't think there's a bias. Like, really, come on.
Yeah. It's just unfortunate because, like that Reddit post said, if everyone just keeps getting more left, you know, radical left or radical right, and not wanting to hear the other side, starting to demonize the other side, not rationalizing their positions.
There's people that do that within their own circles.
Yeah.
It's like, how are we going to get anything done if you're fighting amongst yourselves? How is that going to solve any problems?
Well, if we don't talk to each other and we demonize the other side, like I was saying, then it is going to, like, all the things that he wanted is going to happen. Maybe not necessarily a white ethno-state or whatever he wanted, but I think maybe a civil war could end up happening.
Yeah. How about a hop ethno-state?
Well, that's a different story.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of that, sounds like he would have categorized us as unpure and then basically just said that we were Asian. Nice break in your voice.
Thanks. I appreciate it. But yeah, like you were saying a little bit before about, like the infighting, whatever, having discussions is healthy. Having that cordial discussion about differences, that's good. I mean, especially if it's amongst your peers or whatever. But because I mean, and I know you see it too, and like on social media, there's people that we would say would be more aligned with our politics or whatever, but then you see people that are fighting for whatever issue it is, and yet they're not being cordial. They're being very, petty. They're being an asshole. They're calling each other names. And it's like, dude, what are you guys doing? Like, this is one of the reasons why no one wants to be a part of whatever ideology, It's like, oh, well, I see this. I don't want to be a part of that. Because then what if I say something and they don't like, and then they start coming after me? You know what I mean?
I know you're talking about libertarians, and
Yeah.
I know that would turn people off because libertarians are supposed to, I don't know, stand for liberty.
Mm-hmm. And I get it. Like, okay, you have a difference of opinion. That's fine.
Yeah, but you don't have to be.
But then once you go after them in a way that makes the other person feel like being uncomfortable in discussion is fine. But once you go, when you start calling each other names,
when you start going to insults.
Yeah, insults. You're basically doing what the left and the right do all the time to each other. And yet you're saying, well, see, it's a left and right problem. They do that, And yet here you guys are doing it too. So how's that gonna help people? And how's that gonna help bring people to libertarianism, whatever? It sucks. Because I know there's people that are friendly with us who aren't libertarians, and I'm sure they see that and they go, wow, like I understand why no one wants to be a libertarian, because they see all this infighting, and it's like, well, how's that helping?
Yeah, I think people are just human and they do this stuff no matter what their ideology is.
Mm-hmm.
But
and I'm not saying we're perfect. I'm not saying that we don't.
Well,
do
yeah,
that.
we do that too. But
Yeah.
I think being conscious of it and trying to rationalize your own positions and also see other people's point of views is important to do in like any discussion that you're having, even if you feel really strongly about it. Like I could say I feel really strongly about like the abortion thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty pro-life,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that I should justify violence or name calling or anything like that to someone who is like pro-choice or pro-abortion, because first of all, that's not going to make them think like positively about my side of things.
If anything, it's going to solidify their own position.
They're just going to think of me as less, and then they're going to be more inclined to be like go the opposite direction of what I would want. So I think that like that kind of thing is just bad.
And it's not like we're saying, well, we're gonna try and change your mind on everything. It's just having that discussion.
It's just being aware.
Yeah. So what about the manifesto was kind of the biggest eye opener for you, or like the big thing that kind of just made you go, kind of like this is like really ridiculous and crazy?
Well, the fact that he used references that would end up like demonizing certain groups of people who are not responsible for his attack.
Yeah.
And that it's being used as bait. And the fact that people are just blindly doing what he wanted them to do. It's just kind of scary, because then you could see a possibility of other stuff like this happening.
Yeah, and I guess we're kind of doing that as well, like we're talking about it.
Yeah, but we're not going after certain groups or anything like that, because
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the only person who is to blame for this is the actual shooter.
Mm-hmm.
So over the last couple years, like 3 years or so,
Mm-hmm.
the culture war has become like a thing. A lot of it started with the 2016 election and the primaries and everything, right?
Yep.
So I could see or someone who's very weak or doesn't have a support system and thinks that, has that sort of victim mentality, and then can get pushed by the mainstream media to think some of this stuff. And then, like, also paired with all the stuff that's going on in the Middle East, and our military is creating this refugee crisis and all that stuff. I could see how someone could end up writing this type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also got to think, like, a lot of people have become public figures in trying to fight this from becoming, like, violent.
Yeah.
So it really shows, like, a difference in, like, the people who become violent are the ones who were already broken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Because they kind of went, like I was saying before, they went to that extreme, like as extreme as you can possibly get, where I'm just going to kill people because I have no other options, or I feel like I have no options left, or whatever, So I'm going to go into some building, whatever, and start shooting people, or however they want to kill, plant a bomb, stab, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, once they go to that point, or just aggress whoever, whether it is just killing people or rape or anything like that, that's, like you were saying, that's about as, you're about as weak-minded as you can possibly get.
Yeah. And I think the only thing that we can do right now is to keep talking about it in a normal way, not in a accusatory way.
Mm-hmm. Because I know there's people who, they're friends with people who don't agree with their politics 100%. Or probably not even 50 or 25%.
One of my best friends is, like, a feminist and
Yeah.
very left-wing,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't matter.
Usually it's like, don't talk politics because it might get awkward. But even if you do talk politics, I'm sure it doesn't ever get
Yeah, it's
too
fine.
bad. Yeah.
And that's how things kind of used to be.
Yeah.
It's just been ever since, all the clickbait stuff came along and Donald Trump became the villain.
Mm-hmm.
Now we treat him like he's any worse than any other president.
Which kind of sucks because, some of the things that not some, pretty much everything that he does, there's something that you can say, okay, I don't like that, or whatever, But the things that a lot of these people focus on is like, that's gonna be forgotten in a day or two, or 3 day or whatever. But in terms of like his actual policies, it's like, well, can't we talk about that? But no, we got to say the fact that he said something that we don't, or he tweeted something that we don't like.
Well, that's because, that's what we're calling outrage culture. That's kind of evolved out of the culture war.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a media problem, and I don't know how to solve that, to be honest. But
yeah, it's something that it's something that we're gonna have to work on amongst ourselves, because I think if Trump wins in 2020, I think it's gonna get worse until it gets any better, because they're gonna, whoever the nominee is that's gonna go against him, they're going to be so behind that person, even more so than they were behind Hillary. Oh man, it's gonna be crazy.
Yeah, it's gonna
but
be bad.
it's funny too, because then at the same time, like, you're looking at that short term. Oh, it's gonna be hilarious to see how they react. But then the long term, you're thinking, oh, someone could do something really bad.
Yeah, like I said, the broken people in society are going to take this to the extremes, and then maybe do something else like this. But yeah, so I mean, we just kind of wanted to go over it because it is like a very important thing that has been going on for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And this just kind of shows like a product of crazy that comes out of it.
Yeah. Like very crazy, And I think everyone has to kind of look at themselves in the mirror, kind of be like, okay, what am I doing to help, or am I hurting any of this, And I think everyone kind of has to, I don't know, I guess do their part, I suppose.
I think the way that people do their part, though, right now, like the best that you can do is vote. No, I'm just kidding. Though the best that you can do is to make your own life fulfilling.
Yeah.
Because if you are focused on your family and you're focused on your life, then why would you care about controlling other people's lives?
Yeah, you have to love yourself before you love others.
Yeah, basically. I mean, if you have things that you're passionate about and you're focusing on those things, then why would you be going out there protesting something that has nothing to do with basically anything in your life?
Right.
So I think by focusing on yourself, that's kind of the only thing we can do right now.
Yeah.
Yep, and that's why we're going on a honeymoon soon. So we're going to be focusing on ourselves.
That's right. All right. So, yeah, that's pretty much what we wanted to talk about. Just kind of talk about the culture war and how the manifesto kind of aligns with it, you know? Because that's like the whole culture war is the bigger picture of it. Yeah.
Okay, guys, if you could hear that, I guess we're going to go now.
Yeah. All right. So good talk.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Now you know what's happening. Thanks for listening. If you want to support the show, go to hapasupremacy.com and follow our social media. Have a great day.